Don't envy the finery and fleeting show of sinners, for they are in a miserable situation. But as far as you can, have mercy on them, for in a short time God will destroy them, if they will not repent and turn unto him. Joseph Smith the Prophet.
We are rapidly coming to the end of another amazing season on the Gospel Feast podcast, just as the book of Revelation takes us right up to the very end. So, we are living in the very last days. In this episode, John is going to tell us more about the mysterious Mystery Babylon, which is just one of the many names of the Synagogue of Satan and the Church of the Devil, causing so much misery among us. Let's see what the Lord wanted John to tell us. It's time to cut like a two-edged sword.
All the notable religions of the world have their sacred truths. These are their pearls, to quote the Lord, that are not given freely just because someone asks for them. These are the truths that are offered to the faithful who have proven themselves worthy of the deeper knowledge and meditations that come line upon line and precept upon precept. These are the good works that one must be prepared to receive through faith, repentance, patience, and sometimes endurance. Martin Luther and the evangelical movement like to pretend that such deeper doctrines are not consistent with Jesus' teachings. They are unprepared to adequately answer why the Lord would say things such as this. Matthew 13:11.
And Jesus said, "The knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them."
As always, the King James Version adds nobility to the words recorded. It reads,
And the Lord said, It is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given.
The word to pay attention to here is mysteries. In a religious context, the word refers to the good works and deeper knowledge of Christianity. Events like the Lord's transfiguration, which only Peter, James, and John of the 12 were permitted to see, and of which the Lord said, "Don't tell anyone what you have just seen until I say you can," are examples of mysteries that are not to be shared except in a specific way and at a specific time of the Lord's choosing. It should strike secular Christianity as odd that the Lord's command to keep his mysteries quiet even applied to the rest of the 12, faithful men like Andrew and Matthew. Why couldn't they know? That is the point. Higher good works are on the Lord's timetable for sharing, and always have been. The important thing to understand is that when the Scriptures speak of mysteries, they are speaking of religion. In this chapter we are going to meet Mystery Babylon. Specifically, she is a woman. In heaven's eyes, religions are women because they are protected space of nourishment and transformation, from which the young'uns grow into maturity. A church, a woman, is protected by the male priesthood, which is its function. The heavens, which hold righteous women in great esteem, have many terrible things to say about wicked women, like the kind we are about to meet. She is the worst, the very mother of darkness.
Revelation chapter 17, verse 1. And there came one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will shew unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication.
In other words, this is the mixing of church and state. The kings of the world have benefited greatly by combining with the false churches, over the centuries to own the souls of men. This had worked for a season because it was a mutation of the order of heaven. There, the rightful king would marry the church in purity, a form of atonement and redemption. The queen goes where the king is, and rules where he rules. If the church is the queen, and the king is Almighty God, then you too get to sit where the king sits. In our case, the king bridegroom is to marry the church, Zion. So it's a win-win. Unless, of course, you've been tricked by a clever archdemon into believing that he is the king, and Mystery Babylon is the church bride. Being drunk on power, wealth, and fornication, like this church bride has been, has led her to do many terrible things with little to no recourse for her membership.
So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns.
Note the heads and horns. This is the beast of state controlled by Satan. It has been Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome in 2 forms, and the 10 nations which sprang from Rome. We are living under this last incarnation.
And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon, the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth.
The ruse is here painfully illustrated. John had thought to find the beautiful Zion there. She had fled into the wilderness to hide when the beast of state was unable to eat her son. Remember? Naturally, he suspected to find her waiting. But this is not her. Instead, he finds an impostor, a prostitute. She is not a beautiful bride dressed in the sun, waiting patiently for her bridegroom. She is a hussy, trashy and gaudy. She is drunk with her pride and power. About her forehead is not the crown of 12 priesthood leaders of the house of Israel, the 12 apostles. Instead, she is a mystery. The same mystery cult that once existed in Babylon long ago, redressed in a different gown. She, like the great dragon, is just the same old sin with a new face. All her children are the dogs and harlots and abominations of the entire planet who have trusted in her. In terms of being Mystery Babylon, she is the church of the devil. Specifically in this instance, she has another name. We will learn it from the clues John gives us.
And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration.
Admiration in Shakespearean English also means astonishment, and that is the meaning here. When John saw her, he was shocked to astonishment. Remember that John was the head of the church. From his seat in Ephesus, then banished to Patmos, he had never seen what the church bride had become. When he saw her in the now, he could hardly believe his eyes. She was a marvel. John may have been more shocked to see the statues of his own brethren, Peter, Andrew, and James, not to mention the statues and paintings of himself, adorning her fornication parties. No wonder he marveled. Where once stood the hated Nero, now stood the city of the Vatican.
And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns.
Let me pause here and say with pleasure that I have many Catholic friends. I have always been treated in a manner that I consider Christ-like by them. I cannot say the same for other secular Christian denominations. Catholics should take comfort in knowing that the Latter-day Saints claim that all Christianity, outside the restored gospel is fallen and corrupt. But these verses are plain, and as we shall see, they are undeniable. The Book of Mormon defines the Church of the Devil as being all religions except the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That is true enough. These verses here for John can only be about Christianity as it pertained to John. Thus, it can only be Papal Rome. There were no other denominations. All other interpretations of the text are unsound and dishonest. I still love Catholics. When you baptize them, they make awesome Mormons. The angel reaffirms the truth of this being Rome a second time.
The beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is.
Note this exactly happened within the Roman Empire, as we explored in Daniel and the Last Days, Volume 1 of our series. It seems incomprehensible to the empire that the iron feet of Rome could fall, but it did. From the ruins rose the Holy Roman Empire, with the Pope as its god, the new Caesar. To nail it home a third time, the angel beats us over the head with it.
And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth.
Even in John's day, Rome was called the city of the 7 hills. They are Aventine Hill, Caulilian Hill, Capitoline Hill, Esquiline Hill, Palatine Hill, Quirinal Hill, and Viminal Hill.
And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space.
The mighty kings are the heads of the beast, known as Pharaoh, the kings of Assyria, the Babylonian kings, the Medo-Persian kings, and Greece, who had come and gone by John's day. These 5 had terrorized Israel, but at this point had fallen and passed on. Rome, the 6th, still was and would last a little longer. By John's day, it was already past its prime. One more, the 7th, would come when 10 nations or tribes would rise from Rome's ruin. These would be held together by Papal Rome and called the Holy Roman Empire. Daniel said that they would try and remake the Roman Empire, but because they would be a mixture of strong and weak nation communities, all attempts to reunite the old empire would ultimately fail. The current history of the European Union is proof enough of Daniel's 10 toes and John's 10 horns on one demonic head. They are a failed mixture of weak and strong. It is painfully prophetic that at one time the EU had even debated the return of Latin as their communal tongue. They argued that since Latin was a dead language, it would place all their nation member states on an equal disadvantage. The plan was dropped in the end. The Holy Word says that the European Union will never coalesce like their members hope. God has spoken, but something tells me that they will try to force their will on man anyway. I wouldn't bet on a happy result.
And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition.
Papal Rome will yet be numbered with the sons that are wept over when it falls. We shall see that it will fall hard.
And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast.
They will attempt to unify against the will of God, but will fail, as Daniel foretold in the end. You cannot mix iron with clay, even if Lucifer does the mixing.
These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords, and King of kings. And they that are with him are called, and chosen, and faithful. And he saith unto me, The waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples, and multitudes, and nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled.
Starting with Martin Luther, the same 10 toes of Europe eventually injured the power of Rome, until at last Napoleon Bonaparte ended the reign of the popes as earthly kings. A 4th time the angel will tell us who the whore is. 4 is the number of fallen earth, with its boundaries set by God. The perfect number of times for this.
And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth.
Spiritually, this city would be called Babylon, but physically, by John's day, she was called Rome. John will witness what is left of her short space of time. In John's day, people were being called out of her. This would continue through the works of the Reformation, through the reign of Napoleon, into the restoration of the gospel, to the missionary work going on today. The call has gone out to flee Babylon, who now sits across every ocean. Soon she will fall. Run from her while you can. Lest the reader think we are only picking on Roman Catholics, consider this. All Christianity, including Eastern Orthodoxy, the Reformation, and the evangelical movement, had its roots in the imperial Caesars. If not at first, then increasingly so after February 27th, 380 A.D., when the Edict of Thessalonica put Trinitarian Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire. Even here, the church begins to decay. Poison sprinkled upon the roots eventually kills all the branches of the tree. The poison of apostasy eventually spread into the Eastern Church and into all the branches of the Reformation. Greedy, elitist Luciferian bankers saw the opportunity to run the world, and have plotted to buy everything in this world with money ever since. All that can be done is to call the innocent songbirds from the trees before the mighty angel puts an axe to the trunk, fells the dead wood, and sets it all ablaze. This is exactly what John sees next.
Revelation chapter 18, verse 1. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven, saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities.
We have recorded in the annals of history the terrible tales of Rome's deprivations. They are horrible to read, but they stand as witness to the angel's proclamation above. Here's a list of just a few of what has been preserved to us about the inner doings of the Vatican in the past. As soon as papal Christianity gained legal power in 315 AD, pagan temples were destroyed, and pagan priests were killed by Catholic mobs. Thousands of pagans were murdered. Examples of their sacred sites that were destroyed were the sanctuary of Escalop in Aegaia, the temple of Aphrodite in Golgotha, Aphaca in Lebanon, and the Heliopolis. Between 372 and 444 AD, thousands of Christians who believed in the so-called Manichaean heresy were exterminated all throughout the Roman Empire. In 385 AD, in Trier, Germany, the first Christians were beheaded for heresy against the Roman Church. In 408 to 450 BC, Christian Emperor Theodorus, who ruled then, had a neighborhood of children executed when he learned that they had been playing with the remains of pagan statues that they had found on the ground. In 415 AD, world-famous female philosopher Hypatia of Alexandria was cut to pieces with glass fragments by a hysterical Catholic mob led by their minister. In 782 AD, Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne beheaded 4,500 Saxons who refused to forcefully convert to Romanism. In 1010 AD, the Bishop of Le Mans, France, had the Jews in his area forcefully converted, expelled, or killed. In 1209 AD, the first Catholic crusade against other Christians was ordered by the Pope. It was called the Crusade against the Albigensians. Their crime was that they refused to acknowledge the Bishop of Rome's authority over their own bishops, and they refused to pay the Pope's ordered taxes. 1 million people were killed by the Catholics. In 1209 BC, Pope Innocent III ordered the city of Bellerice, France, and all its people destroyed. On July 22nd, all the inhabitants were killed, including all faithful Roman Catholics who tried to hide their neighbors and friends who didn't want to be Catholic. Records say as many as 70,000 were murdered in the streets. On August 15th, 1209 AD, unnumbered thousands were murdered in the city of Carcassonne on papal orders. Between 1209 and 1229 AD, nearly all of the Cathars, amounting to 1/2 the population of Languedoc, France, were exterminated. The last Cathar was burned alive in 1324 AD. Total Cathars murdered by the Roman Catholics estimated to be at 1 million souls. As many as 11,000 peasants, men, women, and their children, were murdered in Stettin, Germany on May 27, 1234 AD, when they complained about the suffocating church tax that Rome had forced on them. In 1348 AD, the entire Jewish population of Basel, Switzerland, and Strasbourg, France, were burned alive. In 1415 AD, John Huss, a critic of Rome's right to sell indulgences and papal infallibility, was burned at the stake. The Roman Church killed 80,000 Turks in the Battle of Belgrade in 1456 AD. Between 1484 and 1750 AD, modern scholars have documented over 200,000 so-called witches who were burned alive or hung. Most were women, but 20% of them were male. During the Spanish Inquisition, Inquisitor Torquemada alone burned 10,220 people. A minimum of 100,000 Christians were murdered by Rome for being followers of the Josephites, the Polycanites, Runcarians, and Waldensian philosophies. All of these were Christians, but disagreed with the Pope on a handful of doctrines. In 1489 AD, the bishops of Europe ordered forced conversions on all Jews or death. In response, the rabbis drafted the famous Letter of Constantinople. Written on December 22, 1489, it authorized Jews to pretend to convert to Christianity with the goal of destroying Christianity from within. It was on this authority that a combination of Jewish priests and Edonomic Jewish bankers founded the Illuminati to bring open honor to Lucifer and rule the world through secret combinations. This was the beginning of the Pueri of Zion. In 1492 AD, the year Columbus set sail for the New World, more than 150,000 Jews were forcefully expelled from Spain. Many died on the forced exodus. Recent evidence suggests that Columbus was a Marrano Jew and hoped for a new world in part as a place to resettle others needing to escape Catholic persecutions. In Poland during the 15th century, 1,019 churches and 17,987 villages were plundered by the Catholic Knights of the Order on papal command. To this day, the number of murdered victims in Poland remains unknown. It was that many. In 1631 AD, Catholics sacked the city of Magdeburg, Germany. 30,000 peasants were murdered. Eyewitness Frederick Schiller wrote, "In a single church, 50 women were found beheaded. Some were mothers. We found their infants still sucking their dead mother's breasts on the floor." During the 30 Years' War in the 1600s between Roman Catholics and Protestants, at least 40% of the then German population was murdered by Rome. 40% of the population. In 1648, during the Chmielnicki massacres in Poland, 200,000 Jews were murdered. More? Can you stand more? This is a short list. I have a great many more. Sadly, we could go on and on. The list I gave you is by no means the end of it. As an example, one historical record, Fox's Book of Martyrs, lists the names of people murdered by order of the Caesars and popes. When printed and bound, this book was over 1 foot thick. That's larger than a man can get his hand around the binding. When Joseph Smith held this book with 2 hands, he wept and said that these men and women were blessed of God for their sacrifice in defying religious tyranny in their day. He said that they were true martyrs in the cause of truth. A painfully ironic moment, as the Church of the Devil and the beastly forces of the United States would also claim Joseph's life for religion. Historians estimate that over 200 million people have been killed by Rome in one of its 2 phases, imperial or papal. When John saw the blood-stained altar in the 5th seal, he was not seeing a little blood. There's enough human blood in the average human body to fill a little more than a 1-gallon milk jug. Now times this by 200 million people killed by Rome. The loss of the East. While a lot of the blood splattered on heaven's altar came at the hands of Rome, what is less well known among Christians today is the vast amount of blood spilt in the East, in the lands of what was once the Eastern Christian Church. This is important to our study because it includes the lands of John the Beloved's missionary labors. Many are surprised today to learn that upwards of 40 million Christians were killed or driven from their homes by militant Muslims and Buddhists from the Mediterranean Sea all the way to China. Nearly all of the old mosques of Iraq and Iran are built on the ruins of Christian churches. The Emperor Kublai Khan's mother, Surkotani, was a Nestorian Christian princess of the Kharidid Confederacy. She raised her children in the Christian faith when possible. The main reason the Western Church called for the Crusades was to halt the flow of Islam into European Christianity. Islam had killed the Christians of northern Africa and had crossed the sea into Spain. Rome realized that soon it would be surrounded if it did not act. What is so deeply offensive, in my opinion, is how Papal Rome did nothing to aid the Christians of the Eastern Church in their centuries of need. They were angry that the East would not acknowledge the Bishop of Rome as head of them as well. Note, he was only a bishop after all. We have record of the titles of at least 50 Christian books which were lost when Islam captured the great libraries of Christendom. Modern Arab historians like to make much of the great learning which came from Islam during this period. What they leave out is the fact that Eastern Christians had translated much of the Greek classics from Greek and Latin into Aramaic, which was spoken widely in the Eastern Church. The great libraries of Alexandria, Baghdad, Ctesiphon, Otranto, Alanda, and Cairo were all conquered by the Muslims, and all the wealth of these books in Arabic, which were not burned, thrown into rivers, or used to roll their cigars, were read by the Aramaic-speaking Arabs. The truth is, the vast overwhelming amount of knowledge credited to the so-called Golden Age of Islam were stolen from Christian and classical libraries. That's the truth. History is written by the conquerors until it is rediscovered generations later by the seekers of real truth. So now you know. Don't believe everything you read in modern history books. We know that between 666 AD and 1815 AD, there were at least 2 Muslim attacks on Christian and Jewish lands every year. Statistically, Christians and/or Jews were being attacked every 6 months by Muslims. Having been purged from Europe, Muslim pirates took to the seas and started the slave trades out of Africa. They sold blacks into European collected colonies, and they sold 1.5 million whites, both Europeans and Americans, back into the North African slave markets and harems. You didn't know that? Muslim pirates were eventually curbed by President Thomas Jefferson and finally halted by President James Madison in 1815. But that is another story for another day. In all fairness, blood begets blood. The concept of justice, vengeance, and recompense are real and godly emotions. Things that are wrong demanded to be made right or need to be forgiven. The universal nature of justice means that men too often take vengeance into their own hands. The blood of Christ, taken by his kin and Rome, was answered back and forth in vengeance. It was this that the prophet Joseph Smith lamented about when the Protestant and evangelical Christian communities turned against the Latter-day Saints. He asked, how could a Protestant Christian people who had been so terribly mistreated by Rome repeat the same evils against the Mormons? The answer is simple. It takes a tremendous amount of humility and Christian kindness to set aside the outrages done to you. People who are bullied tend to bully, and the abused abuse others. It can be hard to remember at that moment that Jesus taught us to forgive and let go. Vengeance is the Lord's. And even if you choose to forgive, he may still take vengeance, but that is his choice. Either way, you are free. The time of the end. Papal power ended in terms of her previous history, for all intents and purposes, by Napoleon Bonaparte. He is called robotically by many an Antichrist. But I believe that history will bear out that Napoleon was as much called of God in his station as was Alexander the Great before him. That's not to say that either one were good, but that God had ultimately used them for his purposes, in his sovereignty over the rulers of the nations. The Bible speaks of the time of the end as being the conclusion of Satan's total power over man's salvation and the return of humanity's ability to make and keep sacred covenants as free agents. In terms of the book of Revelation, it is the short window of time in the 6th seal when God would hold back his angry angels wanting to cleanse the earth and keep in check the demons running amok among us. This short time was granted so that the Lord might have a chance to glean the field one last time, and seal those of the children of men who would listen to one last plea. These could yet come and gather to a stake of Zion, a city of refuge. Why? If there were none to greet the groom, at the call to marry, the entire earth would be waste. In the book series, Volume 1 of the Gospel Feast series, Daniel in the Last Days, we explored all of this in great detail. Here we will only summarize it. There we showed how the angel Gabriel told Daniel that the power of the beastly kings would end in 1798 A.D. At this time, the spirit of revolution spread among colonial America into Catholic France. The French people were tired of the elitist caste system they toiled under. Spurred on by the success of freedom in America, and financed by Luciferian bankers from London and Paris, the Illuminati, they unleashed a reign of terror. France lacked the God-fearing founders that blessed American shores, so many paid in blood. Voltaire expressed the feeling of the time when he said, "I am weary of hearing people repeat that the 12 men established the Christian religion. I will prove that one man may suffice to overthrow it." The new leaders of France, Rousseau, d'Alembert, Diderot, and the Rothschilds, and others, discarded the Bible and declared atheism and humanism to be the only true religion. This new religion became the frenzy of France, with the leaders of the revolution being known as the atheists. They renamed the ancient Notre Dame Cathedral the Temple of Reason. Donkeys were given drinks out of the former Holy Sacrament chalices, and orgies and humanism ruled the day. It was during this time that a brilliant young soldier, Napoleon Bonaparte, was defending the French Revolution's interests at home and abroad. Soon he took the eye of revolutionary leader Maximilien de Robespierre. By the age of 24, he was promoted to brigadier general. In 1796, he invaded Italy, defeated the papal troops, and occupied papal lands. Pope Pius VI sued for peace, which was granted on February 19, 1797. But just 10 months later, a riot brought another French general, Berthier, back to Rome. There, at the Vatican, on February 10, 1798, he effectively dethroned the Pope, removing all his power as an earthly king. He declared the papal lands free and demanded the Pope renounce all temporal authority. Of course, this last part was too much, and the Pope refused. And so he was taken prisoner 10 days later and escorted out of the Vatican to the citadel of Valence in Drôme, where he died 6 weeks later, on the 29th of August, 1799. At the time, he had reigned longer than any other pope. It would not be long before Napoleon would be appointed to the Provisional Consulate of France. Shortly after, he installed himself as first consul, giving himself sweeping powers of state. A new pope was also appointed by the Church, calling himself Pius VII, but the damage was done. The papal power was broken and has never regained its former glory. In 1804, Napoleon did attempt to make peace with the Vatican in exchange for being declared Emperor of France, but at his coronation ceremony he humiliated Pope Pius VII by taking the crown into his own hands and declaring himself emperor, an event denied by Vatican historians today, despite historical witnesses to the event. The Pope had for centuries demanded the sole right to appoint European successors. Rome enforced this power with a strong armed military commander known as the Holy Roman Emperor. Napoleon didn't care about any of this. He even went so far as to dissolve the Holy Roman Empire and created a new Confederation of the Rhine. It is difficult to be too harsh on the French people. The Catholic Church had been so incredibly oppressive there. Oppressive Christianity is satanic, and has been from the beginning. Papal Rome had manipulated their rulers, tortured dissenting citizens, and burned any Frenchman they disliked at the stake for centuries. Corruption in the church was rampant, and universally known. The masses felt very much like teenagers finally being put in charge of the house while their parents were away. They had for so long been commanded in all things that their newfound sense of freedom knew no bounds. This new religion of reason, as they called it, remained in force until Napoleon Bonaparte ended it in 1799 AD. Under Catholic French law, vast tracts of papal and elitist lands could not be subdivided for any purpose. This guaranteed that the powerful would always remain so, while the poorer classes could never achieve private ownership. The Lord dislikes the concept of landlords and tenants. In Catholic France, the Church owned everything, and your soul as well. When the French revolutionary government needed funds to pay back the Rothschild banks, they simply confiscated Catholic properties and auctioned them off. The Illuminatis who bought them simply paid themselves back. This is a trick they still do. The resulting sale netted more than 700 million pounds sterling in 1790 currency. That is literally billions and billions and billions of dollars today. It didn't take long for the French masses to cry for a more stable religion than that of reason. So Napoleon released 20,000 Catholic clergymen who had been imprisoned during the Revolution. He forced them to swear allegiance to the government of France and not to the Pope in Rome. These heroic events were called for from the heavens and will be better understood by the preschoolers of the millennium than they are by the scholars of today.
And I heard another voice from heaven, saying, Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. In the cup which she hath filled, fill to her double. How much she hath glorified herself, and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow.
Despite his ultimate allegiances, Napoleon was the one who heard the call and did just that. Eventually, Napoleon turned on the Illuminati bankers who were funding him, and they pressured England to bring him down. We are going to discover at a future day that this basic same thing happened to American President Lincoln and JFK. In recent years, Papal Rome has regained some of her lost prestige, but this was necessary. For after the people have been warned to flee from her, the Lord himself will deal the final blow. He will also destroy the Luciferian bankers at the same time. So they had to continue to exist. John heard the heavens say next,
Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication, and lived deliciously with her, shall bewail her, and lament for her, when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come.
Here it is like a thief in the night. I suspect that this will be near the time of the great worldwide financial collapse that we studied in Zechariah. Note the rationale for thinking so.
And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more. The merchandise of gold and silver, and precious stones, and of pearls, and fine linen, and purple, and silk, and scarlet, and all theine wood, and all manner vessels of ivory, and all manner vessels of most precious wood, and of brass, and iron, and marble, and cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheat, and beasts, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, and slaves, and souls of men. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city, that was clothed in fine linen, and purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls! For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, and every shipmaster, and all the company in ships, and sailors, and as many as trade by sea, stood afar off. And they cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads, and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea, by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate.
Many have all their treasures here on earth. These will miss the power and prestige that their wealth has given them. Think of the mighty and powerful landlords, business tycoons, Silicon Valley geeks, CEOs, big pharma, royal families, Illuminati elitists, Hollywood celebrities, and investment bankers of our planet. Strip them of their wealth, and what are they? Would anyone follow these nerds? Would anyone sit at their feet and listen to their blather? Would anyone even report in the news of their latest threats to move to Canada if we don't obey them? Would any rent boys or silly women follow them around? Without the digital numbers in their bank accounts, what would they be but nerds, sycophants, narcissists, Satanists, and whiners? They are only so-called elites on this planet for their fine odors, wines, vessels, and slaves. They will vanish in a day. Don't you hear the plea? O you exhausted of the earth, store up your treasures in heaven, where there are not thieves to steal them, and no rust to waste them away. Rejoice with the heavens instead when you see the smoke of all these assets burning. Your Lord and God will be coming soon after. It's okay to rejoice over her fall on that day. See, the Lord has given you permission.
Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all.
This rock is both Daniel's and Matthew's. The only sure course is to change course now. Flee and repent.
And the voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee, and no craftsman, of whatsoever craft he be, shall be found any more in thee. And the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets, and of saints, and of all that were slain upon the earth.
With the death of the whore, who pretended to be the bride of Christ, space is made for the true bride, the lady named Zion.
The truth can be very uncomfortable until you remember the Lord's promise that knowing the truth frees you from the plots of Lucifer. There are many on the earth today that believe that Lucifer is going to win and that Judah will yet sit on the throne of the world based out of Jerusalem. These base their understandings on the Old Testament and other mystery texts. We are so fortunate to have the New Testament witness that things are not going to go according to their plans. Jesus Christ was victorious on the cross, and he will yet be victorious when he alone comes to rule. But until that blessed day, we have a few chapters more in Revelation to feast on. Even so, come, Lord Jesus.